Welcome to this video about nutrition for senior citizens. This video is for you if you're concerned about falling and fracturing a bone, if you want to spend more time with your grandkids and being able to get down and up off the floor, if you have cool retirement plans that involve traveling and you need your fitness to be able to get around, and if you don't want to spend your later years having to be taken care of by a caregiver, whether it's a family member or somebody else. Here's what we're going to discuss in this video. We're going to talk about the most important nutrient for seniors, followed by the two most common nutritional deficiencies in seniors, and lastly, nutrients lost through medications. There are certain medications that, yes, they have beneficial effects, but along with that, they have certain deleterious effects that we'll talk about here. Before we get to it, who am I? My name is Igor, and I'm a personal trainer specializing in people over 60. Like these people who are all clients of mine and my team. Additionally, I am an author of at the time of this recording, 8 different books on exercise and nutrition for chronic conditions, one of which is called High Blood Pressure Reversal Secrets. Another one is Type 2 Diabetes Reversal Secrets and Osteoporosis Reversal Secrets. And if you want more resources on nutrition and exercise after 60, just visit this link, www.fitnesssolutionsplus.ca/YT-over-60, and that link is also included in the description for this video right below. So click on that in there. Now, what's the single most important nutrient for seniors? Bar none, it is protein. Now, why protein? Protein helps you with a number of different functions as you get older, especially avoiding two common conditions. One is called sarcopenia, which is low muscle mass. A lot of seniors slow down their walking and have a hard time getting up and down off the floor because of low muscle mass. The muscles are simply not strong enough to be able to sustain their daily activities. Another reason why protein is very beneficial for seniors is bone density and bone mass. One condition is osteoporosis, and that is when bones get weak. When bones get weak, the risk of fracture and falling starts to get a lot higher. Now, here is one study showing you the importance of dietary protein for osteoporosis and hip fracture. The study is titled "Prospective Study of Dietary Protein Intake and Risk of Hip Fracture in Post-Menopausal Women." And here's what the researchers did. They recruited 125 postmenopausal women and divided them into 4 different groups. Group number 1 consumed less than 16% of their daily calories as protein. Group number 2, between 16 and 18% of their daily calories was protein. Group number 3, between 18 and 20% of their daily calories was protein. And group number 4 had over 20% of their daily calories as protein. And here were the results. During the duration of this study, which was 3 years, group number 1 experienced 16 hip fractures, so they consumed less than 16% of their daily calories as protein. Group number 2, between 16 and 18% of their daily calories as protein, same number, so that didn't really help. Group number 3 actually had experienced a pretty good drop in the risk of hip fractures, and group number 4 only experienced 5 hip fractures. So you can see that based on this, at least, it seems like the appropriate level of protein is over 20% of their daily calories. But let's quantify that a little bit. How much protein? Well, according to one study titled "Protein Consumption in the Elderly, What is the Optimal Level of Intake?", the conclusion was that people over 60 have higher protein requirements than people under 60. And the reason for that is because digestion and absorption is not as good in people over 60 as it is in people under 60. So to get the same effects as people under 60, people over 60 require more protein. So if you're wondering, if you're a numerically minded person, you're wondering how much protein is that? How much protein do I need? Protein requirements depend on 2 main factors. One is your body weight, and 2 is your activity level. So if you're sedentary, if you're not exercising at all, and I would include, even if you're walking, it would be considered more in the sedentary category, unless you're walking with enough intensity that it becomes serious exercise. So if you're sedentary, you require between 1.2 to 1.8 grams per kilogram per day. If you're doing cardio only, you require between 1.8 and 2.1 grams per kilogram per day. Strength training only, 2.4 to 2.7 grams per kilogram per day. And strength training plus cardio, same as strength training only, 2.4 to 2.7 grams per kilogram per day. So now that you know how much protein do you need, let's talk about what are the best protein sources. And it's really just 3 simple categories of sources. And it's very, very simple: meat, fish, and seafood. These are the three best protein sources, and all kinds of meat, fish, and seafood are good. So beef, chicken, turkey, pork, lamb, all are good. All fish are good. So it's not just tuna, it's mackerel, it's tilapia, it's salmon. All fish are good. All seafood are also good when it comes to protein. So shrimps, crab, lobster, and so on. They're all good protein sources. This is what I call grade A protein. The reason it's grade A protein is because it contains more than 30 grams per serving. So this will cover a big chunk of your daily protein requirements. For example, a chicken or a turkey breast contains about 40-45 grams. A can of tuna is about 40 grams. Um, a piece of salmon might be somewhere about 30-32 grams, and so on. So these are the best protein sources: meat, fish, and seafood. There are also what I call decent protein sources. This is what I would call grade B protein. Grade B protein contains between 10 and 30 grams of protein per serving. Some examples of that is beans, which contain between 12 and 14 grams of protein per cup. Lentils, about the same. Cheese, so cheese is only about 5 or 6 grams per slice, but if you eat 2 slices of cheese, that's 10 to 12 grams of protein. Eggs, again, one egg is not a great protein source, only 6 grams per medium-sized egg. But if you have 2 eggs, then you get about 12 grams per serving. Chickpeas, very similar to beans and lentils, so about 10 to 12 grams. And yogurt, Greek yogurt specifically, not regular yogurt, however. Greek yogurt is about 12 to 14 grams per serving. Regular yogurt, only 5 or 6 grams per serving. So these are, again, are decent protein sources. Not as good as grade A protein, but not as bad as what we're about to discuss. And then there's things that people say are good protein sources, but really aren't. And the reason they aren't great protein sources is because they have less than 10 grams of protein per serving. Does that protein count towards your daily requirements? Absolutely. Does it hit a big proportion of your protein requirements? Absolutely not. So things like nuts, whether it's cashews or almonds or pistachios or hazelnuts or anything else, they are not a good source of protein. A serving of nuts is about 50 grams. 50 grams of nuts contain only about 5 grams of protein, so you don't get a lot. Vegetables. There is not a single vegetable out there that is a great protein source. All vegetables, 100% of them, are less than 10 grams of protein per serving. Bread, only about 5 or 6 grams per slice. Peas, same thing, 2 to 4 grams per slice. When wild rice, pretty low as well, 7 to 8 grams per cup. So none of these are great protein sources. If these are not great protein sources, then why do people often think they're great protein sources? The reason for that is because they are not being compared to the best protein sources. They're not being compared to meat, fish, or seafood. They're being compared to other things in their category. For instance, when people say that broccoli is a good protein source, the real question is compared to what? Broccoli is a good protein source compared to spinach. That is true. Broccoli is a good protein source compared to lettuce. Absolutely. Broccoli is not at all a good protein source compared to chicken. Wild rice is a great protein source compared to white rice. It has a lot more protein than white rice. Wild rice is a very bad protein source compared to chicken. So it's really what is it compared to? And if you want to make something look good, compare it to something much worse than itself. But if you want to have an accurate representation of how good of a protein source is it, don't compare it to other things in its category. Compare it to the best protein sources: meat, fish, and seafood. Now, let's talk about two of the most common nutritional deficiencies in seniors. The two most common ones are vitamin B12 and vitamin D. These are the two most common nutritional deficiencies. And so, what are some symptoms of vitamin B12 deficiency? One is memory loss. Another one is difficulty walking or a slow pace. Three is poor muscle strength or essentially muscle weakness. Four is depression and forgetfulness. Okay, these are not exhaustive, these are just some of the symptoms, and there are others. So now that we know that this is one of the two most common nutritional deficiencies in seniors and the symptoms, what are the best food sources, nutritional sources of vitamin B12? One of them is oysters, beef, crab, and the best one by far is liver, beef liver. These are the best sources of vitamin B12. There's also decent sources of B12. Not as great as these, but substantial. Milk and fortified cereals. By themselves, usually cereals don't really have B12, but most cereals are fortified with B12, so that makes them a decent source. Then there's things that people say contain B12, but actually doesn't. Things that people, usually vegans, often say contains B12 but doesn't are things like mushrooms, spirulina and chlorella, and tofu or soy. And why don't they contain B12? Because according to this website, B12-vitamin.com, they contain what are called analogs. Analogs are essentially a look-alike. They look like vitamin B12 chemically, but don't behave like B12 in real life. In other words, if you were to test your blood levels for B12 levels, it would appear as though mushrooms and spirulina and stuff like that, they raise your B12 levels. But if you use the gold standard test called methylmalonic acid, you'll find that it actually doesn't raise B12 levels and possibly even blocks B12 absorption. So it's very strange sometimes when you see normal B12 levels on a test, but you have the symptoms of low B12 levels. Why might that be? It might be because you're consuming a lot of these B12 analogs, which, again, they're not bad for you, they just don't contain B12. Now that we know that, what are some of the symptoms of vitamin D deficiency, the other most common deficiency in seniors? One of them is forgetfulness and low energy levels. Another one is insomnia. Another one is depression and low mood. And the third one is low bone density and therefore a higher risk of fractures. This is also by no means exhaustive. There are other symptoms, but these are some of the ones that are most concerning to seniors. And so, what are some of the best dietary sources of vitamin D? Well, we know that vitamin D is a sunshine vitamin, but it also makes sense to get it through food. And very often, for vitamin D to be synthesized, we need proper kidney and liver function. Kidney and liver function declines in seniors, so sometimes just getting the sun is not enough. Ideally, it is, but often it isn't. So, what are some good dietary sources? Unlike vitamin B12 and unlike protein, there's not a lot of sources, dietary sources of vitamin D. So, the best sources are actually supplements and milk. Fatty fish like anchovies or mackerel or salmon contain a little bit of vitamin D, but these are probably your best sources. So, milk and supplements. Now, often, seniors will also be taking certain medications, maybe cholesterol lowering medications like statins or antidepressants or protein pump inhibitors, which decrease the amount of heartburn. And some of those, yes, they have the desirable effects of what they're supposed to do, but they also have some deleterious effects. And along with those deleterious effects come certain nutrient depletions. So, one common medication often taken by seniors is Lipitor, or as a general category, statins, cholesterol lowering medications. Statins will often deplete coenzyme Q10, which is often found in meat. Another common medication in seniors is antidepressants. They will deplete both sodium and melatonin, which is a bit ironic because you're taking them to relieve depression often, but not always. But they make it difficult to sleep in some cases. So by depleting melatonin. Um, and a third category that often is used by seniors is protein pump inhibitors for heartburn, and they often deplete vitamins B12, iron, and vitamin D. Ironically, these are two of these three are the most common deficiencies in seniors to begin with. Now, this is not exhaustive. There are other medications and their drug and their nutrient interactions. So make sure you speak to a pharmacist before you start taking a nutrient in combination with a medication because a lot of the side effects of medications are often caused simply by nutrient depletions. And by just supplementing with whatever you're deficient in, and whatever the deficiency caused by a certain medication, you could avoid a lot of the side effects. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and if you want more resources on nutrition and exercise after 60, visit this link, www.fitnesssolutions+.ca/YT-over-60. That link is in the description for this video, so you can click there as well. What you'll find in this resource is one report on nutrition over 60, so similar to this, and also how to exercise after 60, as well as a protein calculator, which will help you figure out how much are you currently getting and how much do you need to get.